So James Earl Ray was the accused assassin. He was brought back and he was imprisoned. He was held in Shelby County Jail. Lights on for 24 hours. Cameras on for 24 hours. Under full surveillance. His lawyer was a man called Arthur Haynes. The Haynes father and son team defended him. Art Haynes was paid for his defense by making an alliance with a writer called William Bradford Huey. Huey had a contract with Look magazine, so Huey paid Haynes for giving him inside stories on the case. When James Earl Ray found out that information he was giving to Haynes, that Haynes was giving to Huey, was going to the FBI, who were visiting people whose names he was revealing, James got very uncomfortable with this whole arrangement and he fired Art Haynes. And he brought on the Texas Tiger, Percy Foreman. And Percy Foreman began to represent James, and he was determined there was going to be a trial, and that's why he came on. And then lo and behold, at the last minute, virtually at the midnight hour, Percy said, James, you got to plead guilty. And you got to plead guilty because they got you convicted, the media's convicted you, they're going to fry your ass, he said. They're going to send your father back to Idaho. He violated parole there 50 years ago. They're going to send him back to jail. They're going to harass your family. And James, my health is not very good, and I can't give you your best defense. So I think it's better for you to plead guilty. James said that last reason was the one that really made him decide to plead. And Percy said, when you plead, it's all right. You hire another lawyer and you can overturn this guilty plea and you get yourself a trial and you'll get a lawyer who's healthy and fit can represent you. James said, I haven't got any money to hire a lawyer, Percy. He said, that's all right. Don't worry about that. I'll give you the money. I'll pay Jerry, your brother, $500. He can go hire a lawyer. Now, Percy not only told him this, he put it in writing. He put this in an actual letter. Dear James, I'm advancing you this money, $500, on the condition that you will cause no problems at the guilty plea hearing. So here's the lawyer, the man, talking him into pleading guilty and paying for him to hire a new lawyer. So James pled on March 10th, 1969. And on March 13th, 1969, he filed his motion papers for a new trial. And from March 13th, 1969, till the day he died in 1998, April 1998, he tried to get this trial that he never had. So, Judge Preston Battle was reviewing those papers on March 31st, 1969. Judge Battle was the judge of the case who had sentenced him to 99 years, accepted the plea, but he'd become a little concerned about some aspects of the evidence and some things that he hadn't been told. So he was taking his time in ruling on this motion. But on March 31st, 1969, his time was up, because he died of a heart attack. He was found at his desk, in his chambers, with his head on James Earl Ray's motion papers. Now, under Tennessee law, when you die of a heart attack, or any other kind of cause of death, and a motion is pending before you as a judge, the motion is automatically granted. There were 2 motions for a new trial pending for Judge Preston Battle when he died. And guess who did not get the trial? And guess who did get it? Well, James did not get it. And so he started his own pro se motions, and he had a variety of lawyers to try to help him get a trial over the years before I met him. When Martin was killed, I went to the memorial service in Memphis and the funeral in Atlanta with Ben Spock, and Bob Kennedy invited us to go up and have a word in his suite in Atlanta. And I think a number of my friends did go. I think Benjamin went, and Julian Bond and some others. I just decided I'd had it, so I didn't go. I'd known Bob Kennedy when I was an even younger person, 64, when I handled his campaign, Westchester County, I was a citizens chairman. I didn't like him then. I didn't like his brother-in-law, Steve Smith. I didn't like any of the family. I thought he was opportunistic, arrogant, and didn't understand how the real world functioned, real people had to live. And that was my assessment of Bob Kennedy in 64 after working with him. But now I regret I didn't go see him in 68 because I think he was quite a different person. I think he had gotten out. I think he'd been to Mississippi. I think he'd seen people living under floors. And I think Bob Kennedy, who was assassinated, was really quite a different person. And so I have that regret. But in any event, I was finished with politics, and so I walked away. 9 years later, Ralph Abernathy called, and he said, "I'd like to go up and have you interrogate James Earl Ray in front of me so I can hear what he has to say." I said, "What do you mean you want to hear what he has to say?" I thought he'd gone around the bend. I said, "Isn't he guilty, Ralph?" I always thought, I never gave it a second thought. I thought they're the right guy. He pled, didn't he? I didn't know any of the story of why he pled. And I said, "Well, I think I'd like to do this. Will you do it?" So I don't know anything about the case. It took me several months. It's like it's flying the time. I did research. Then we went to see James Earl Ray in August 1978. And I believed I was going to see a very aggressive, angry, racist guy who was very knowledgeable about weapons and who was probably very astute at being a con man. And so I was prepared for all of that. And brought a psychiatrist from Harvard who was a friend of mine, Howie Behrens. He was a body language specialist. He would sit in a corner, and as I battered away at Ray, he was supposed to watch him and see how he flinched and what movements he made, and give me some indication of anxiety reactions, things of that sort. We did this for 5 hours, and I hit him very hard. And Ralph said this long prayer at the beginning, set the tone. Then fell asleep occasionally throughout the 5 hours, as Ralph always did. When I was on platforms with Ralph and Martin was speaking, and Ralph would start to snore. And I'd end up hitting him in the ribs. I'd wake him up. He just had this sleepy temperament, I guess. So, anyway, we came away from that interview, and James had answered questions as directly as he could with a totally different view of this person. First of all, this was a guy who was painfully shy. He was quiet-spoken. If anything, he was docile. He wasn't aggressive. It emerged he wasn't a racist at all. When he worked in a shoe factory, he would shoot craps with the black workers after. He'd go to a bar with them. He hung out with black workers who were colleagues of his. He had nothing against black people. He knew very little about guns, and he was a very poor shot. His Army records were abysmal in terms of his ability with the rifle. And he was a petty stick-up guy who, when he was out of work, used to hang out in a bar, and somebody would come up with a good idea, and he'd fall in line with it. And he got in so much trouble by hanging out in bars and hearing these good ideas that he ended up spending a lot of time in jail. He was incompetent. Even as a stick-up man, he was incompetent. He couldn't sometimes get to a supermarket on time to hold it up. By that I mean, not that it would be closed, but that the time lock would have been set on the safe. And he would come in after the time lock had already been set on the safe. And he'd go to the guy at the cashier and say, "Well, now, why don't you get me that money from the safe?" If I said, "Mister, the lock is set. There's nothing we can do about it. I mean, we'll give you our money, but there's nothing we can do about that time lock." And he would, "I don't want your money. I want the money in there." So he was incompetent. He used to carry five bullets in a six bullet cylinder. And it took me years to get him to admit why he only had 5 rather than 6 bullets. When he was captured at Heathrow Airport, he had a gun, he had 5 bullets in it. And he said finally he admitted to me one time, he said, well, I used to always keep the firing pin cylinder empty. He said, because once I shot myself in the foot. That's embarrassing. So this is the nature of this guy, who was an escaped convict and on the run. And who once, when he escaped from prison, he was aided by the falling asleep of a guard. And when there was an internal investigation, when they caught him, they brought him back and they put him up to try to find out how he escaped and how he managed to get out. He refused to testify against the guard. Refused to tell on the guard. And I said, why'd you do that? He said, well, the reason he gave was, I might need him again someday or something, something like that.